Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. In the world of Bigfoot, there's so many crazy stories out there of people encountering Sasquatch out in the wilderness. Usually, the encounters are they're alarming. People aren't expecting to see a Sasquatch. They have a crazy, life-changing experience. They go home, they try and tell people about it, and nobody believes them. In some other instances, the encounters are a bit darker. And in the story I'm going to talk about today, it came very close to ending in tragedy. This is a classic Bigfoot encounter from the early 1960s in British Columbia. I've never talked about it on the channel before. I didn't know it existed until today, honestly. So I just stumbled upon it, and it has elements in it. It has details that are very unique, and I've never heard of before in any other story, so I wanted to share with you guys, and you'll notice these things too when I go over the story. I'm going to narrate it here, and then after I'm going to share my thoughts, but it does kind of take a scary turn, so let's get into it. I wrote this almost 25 years ago. I have no idea how many times it's been published since then. I also have nothing more to add. I make no observations regarding the following. It was as I've written. On August 23rd, 1960, I'd been on my own for about 6 months, living by competing at rodeos. I was 16. I had just finished a rodeo in Washington and had a couple $100s in my pocket. 3 fellow hands asked me to go with them on a canoe trip in BC to get their winter meat. They were all BC natives. There was Jim Palmentier, Kid Chatlin, and Earl Condon. Jim and Kid were sons of French trappers and native mothers. Earl was a full-blood native. They had lots of equipment and knew the area to the north and east of Risk Creek. We would launch the freighter canoes, which were 20 feet long with 7.5 Evinrude kicker motors, at a place near Horsley, east of Williams Lake, and go north, east from there, up a string of lakes and rivers. We took 2 canoes with 35 gallons of spare gas, a spare propeller, and 100 shear pins. We had a tent in each canoe, a rifle and a shotgun, 2 fishing rods, 1 tackle box, bedrolls, and a grub box. We traveled light because we knew there would be portages, and since they were all natives, they could shoot anything as we went. We had 20 pounds of flour, salt, pepper, tea, lard, pemmican, and tobacco to give to the natives we encountered along the way. My friends were from 20 to 23 years old. I was the baby. The first 2 days were uneventful. We made good time and moved steadily up a series of lakes and creeks. The first night, we camped at an abandoned mine of some sort and dined on fresh fish, rice, and beans. Day 2, the streams got narrower and swifter, and we had 2 portages. Still, we made nearly 50 miles. In our canoe, Jim Palmentier and we had a Winchester Model 110 and my 12 gauge. Ducks and geese were everywhere, and we had those for dinner on the second night. A green branch is bent in a U shape and inserted into the cavity of the duck, and then it's suspended over the fire coals. The best duck I ever ate. On day 3, Kid and Earl in the lead canoe rounded a bend and shot a young moose of about 600 pounds. We spent 4 hours dressing and boning, caching the meat on an elevated platform. It froze every night. We were at the base of a small lake, and as we were working, 3 canoes with natives came down the lake at full speed. Kid waved them in. There were 4 adult males and 2 maybe teenage males, and 3 adult women and 1 girl of about 10. I assumed they were an extended family. We gave them about 100 pounds of meat, some flour, and tea and tobacco. They spoke no English, at least not in front of me, and I understood not one word, except twice, when one of the women said, "Sasquatch," and laughed twice. At the time, I assumed she was making a joke for me. They left after smoking with us and giving us 3 big whitefish and some pemmican. We took maybe 20 pounds of prime meat, caching the rest under a tarp and some bark. The platform was standard cache for that area, about 12 feet off the ground. We went on, still heading north and east. We left the small lake and went through a chute into another lake, and then east into a smaller river. This stream was maybe 40 to 60 feet wide and medium swift. At about 7, we started looking for a campsite and found one at the north bank in a bend of the river. The right bank was covered with boulders, rounded by glaciation and current, but the left bank was clear with a flat area under some trees. We were all tired and hit the sack before full dark. It doesn't get dark here until tomorrow. Now at some time, at maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, Jim and I were awakened by a loud crash in the campsite. Thinking bear, we grabbed our guns and kicked back the tent flap. Nothing. Jim had a flashlight and he turned it on. Earl and Kid were now out of their tent and armed. A boulder about the size and shape of a bowling ball had destroyed our Dutch oven and part of the cookbox. We stood around, trying to sort things out, when a second boulder hit Kid and Earl's tent dead center. It came straight down through the trees. I was standing there open-mouthed when both Kid and Jim grabbed me and Earl and dragged us deeper into the trees. Naturally, there was a lot of discussion, but I won't relate the tenor of that. We spent the rest of the short night in a circle, back to back with the safeties off. From time to time, we would hear more rocks hit, and once, just once, some sort of strange hooting from the other side of the river. After good sunup, we slowly crept back to camp. One tent was toast, as was the cookbox and most of the cooking equipment. I counted 9 rocks ranging in size from bowling ball to beach ball size, the largest weighing maybe 150 to 200 pounds. Fortunately, the canoes were undamaged, and we quickly pulled up camp and started out. We got to the meat cache that morning, and it was gone. Not destroyed, gone. Totally, 100% gone. There was no logs, no rope, no meat, no carcasses. I have no opinion. We ran wide open out of there and camped that night in the canoes in the middle of a lake. Jim and Kid are now dead, killed in a float plane crash some years ago. Earl, I don't know about him. I'm certain of only 5 things regarding that trip. 1, those rocks were not on the bank where we pitched camp and when we pitched camp. They were not carried into our camp. They were thrown. No human being did it. I have no desire to ever go into that country again. And 5, I'm not a believer or a skeptic, but I don't exactly discount much of which I don't understand. So, a very unique rock throwing experience. You have these guys out there on the river canoeing, they kill a moose, they're skinning the moose, they encounter these other indigenous people coming down the river, and they mention Sasquatch, not Sasquatch, Sasquatch. But later on in the trip, you know, that night, like, they stashed this moose on the cache. Maybe this Sasquatch creature, or creatures, I don't know if it was one or multiple of them, they don't know. But maybe the Sasquatch creature was pissed that they killed that moose and just left it out there. Because the weirdest element of the story to me, like, isn't the rock throwing, it's the removal of the food cache, not just the meat, but the entire structure, like the logs and everything, this 12-foot high cache. At some point in the night, it was dismantled, and then these creatures, or the creature, was throwing rocks seemingly across the river. It didn't, like, the guy didn't say that they heard splashing in the water or anything. I guess the creatures could have come from somewhere else, but he did say that where they were camping, there were no rocks. It was pretty flat and clear, and all the boulders and rocks were on the other side of the river. So you have creatures that are able to throw these like 100, 200 pound rocks across the river, so they're raining down on the camp basically, right on top of a tent. This is one of those rare stories where a rock throwing incident could have very easily killed someone. It's not just little pebbles. Like in a lot of Bigfoot stories, you'll hear about people or Sasquatch, not people. You'll hear about Sasquatch throwing rocks at people, and it'll be in a way where it'll be kind of harmless. It might be an intimidation thing or a scare tactic. They're not actually throwing them. They're not aiming for the people. They're not trying to hurt them. But in this case, it seems like they may have been. I mean, they were pretty far away, so like to be able to throw a boulder or a rock accurately and to like know exactly where the people are might be kind of tricky. Maybe they weren't trying to hurt anyone, and it was just because they couldn't see. It's in the dark and on the other side of the river. Like maybe they accidentally hit the tent and the cooking equipment and whatnot, and there's 9 rocks, he said. So I don't know. They killed the moose, and it seems like something wasn't happy. But the funny thing is they slept in the middle of a lake after they got the heck out of there. I mean, they huddled up. They spent the night out in the woods on guard, waiting for something to happen. And in the morning, as soon as they packed up, you know, they got out of there, and then they slept the next night on the lake. So that is kind of hilarious. I mean, if you want to be safe, I guess that's the best way to do it. If you have the canoes, I mean, your odds are probably best at survival from a Sasquatch in the middle of the lake. I don't know what their swimming capabilities are. At least they got out of there, they survived, and nobody got hurt. But a very interesting and unique story. I've never heard of anything like that happening before, like a whole meat cache getting, or food cache, or whatever you want to call it, getting taken away somewhere. Like, I wonder what happened to it. Usually we hear stories about Bigfoot building weird tree structures out of sticks, but in this case they're dismantling a human tree structure. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think this is a real story as well? Like, do you think it's made up? Does it sound made up to you? It seems like a legit story to me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.